Uh, yeah, I have uh, it's almost a practical question. Seems very basic, but could be fruitful. Um, just appreciating the question that was asked before and the response first. Very meaningful for me. And that was really macro. And so this question is going to be a little more micro. But I'm working on JYN before this call, Judge and Neighbor Worksheet. And yeah, I'm just noticing that the distinction between, we have these different sections, and there's shoulds and there's wants and there's needs and all that. And sometimes, you know, uh, the distinction is pretty clear, and sometimes it's a bit murkier. And I recognize that part of this is just the way my mind works, looking for distinctions. Maybe that's true for a lot of people. I don't know. Um, but in particular, my question is around, wants versus needs. So maybe this is a question around the work, and maybe it's just a general question about human experience, both. Um, I'm curious how we could sort of tease out the difference, or what are some things that can compare and contrast between the two.
Sure. Yeah. I think you have a good point that there's kind of two ways of looking at it. One is in general in the human experience. What's the difference between a want and a need? And the other is specifically when you're writing a judge your neighbor worksheet. And I can address both of those. So in general, in the human experience, in my experience, because that's what I refer to, uh, there is a difference between a want and a need. Like for me, a need has to do with like survival. I need this to survive. I need food to survive. I need, there's different things that I need that are essential. That's what I consider essential for me. And wants are what make me happy. I like to do that. That's my preference, or I like that. I want that. It can get very attached, but a want is a little less strong for me than a need. A need is I need it. Like this is life or death. Um, and when we're talking about our thinking and the mind, when I hear a need come for myself, it's what is at stake. It's usually not my actual life that's at stake. It's not life or death in that sense, but it's probably life or death for my ego. Some part of me, some identity is feeling very threatened, and if it doesn't get that, it's going to be, it's not going to survive. So I need that. I need her to pay attention to me because why? Because I have the identity, I'm the leader. And if she doesn't pay attention to me, it means that I no longer am in power and therefore I have died as the leader. So, that's kind of how I generally think about wants and needs. Wants, I just want, I want an ice cream or something. I want something and it's just this desire, but it doesn't get to that core of I need that, otherwise I'm something in me is going to die. And so that's one way of looking at it. That's kind of generally speaking in terms of human experience. But specifically, when you're writing a judge your neighbor worksheet, I tend to think of the difference between the wants and the needs. Wants come up on line two. What is it that how do you want that person to change? What do you want them to do? That's the line two question. And then the needs are, in order for you to be happy, what do you need them to think, say, feel, or do? And the key for this, to my mind, is um, well, there's several factors. One is the wants are very emotional. They're just, I want. It's like a 2-year-old. We sometimes call it the tantrum, right? So I want him to listen to me. I want him to, you know, get off his phone. I want him to look me in the eyes. I want them to grow up. Like they're almost baby-like in their intensity. Not always, but it's just I want it, I want it, I want it, and this is what I want, and I just want them to change. Uh, it's there's not much reasoning there. It's not much. It's just raw emotion, and we capture that. That's what I consider the first layer of the stress. All these wants. It's my argument with reality. Um, I want him to be different, and this is exactly how I want him to be different. Um, and I'll just bring in the shoulds here because they come in a progression. So the next line is the shoulds, which is your advice to that person. What should they do? And that is, once you've gotten that emotional thing out, then the shoulds are like, okay, so how can I manipulate them to get me to do what I want them to do? They should see, that we would have such this great connection if he would just look at me, and he should understand that he's just prolonging his own problem. Two heads are better than one. He should come over and talk to me, blah, blah, blah. So I'm coming into these shoulds are advice that might motivate him, that might be some baby steps for him to take, a little recipe, or something that's going to get him to move in the direction that I originally want. Now, I'm still arguing with reality because in reality he's not doing that. So I'm not uh, I'm not loving what is in that moment, but it's a subtler kind of argument with reality. The wants are just like, rah, I just want them to smarten up, and the shoulds are, here's how to smarten up and why to smarten up, and here's the details. Just follow the breadcrumbs. I'll lead you there. So that's wants and shoulds. And then when you come to the needs, um, it's I think the key for the needs is the timetable. So when a situation happens, when something happens that's stressful, there's the moment it happened, right? In this moment, I asked him something and he ignored me, right? So that's my little moment. And I want him to listen to me. So that's my argument with reality in that moment. And my advice is he should see that this is going to benefit him. So great, he should do that. But the need is just after that moment, he's already not listened to me. What do I need him to do to make it right for me? He's already committed the offense. Now, what can he do to make that right? And it requires a little bit of space and time uh, afterwards. And so when I'm thinking, I need him, what do I need from him? And the idea is when he did this offense, my belief is he hurt me. He did something to me. Like it hurt somewhere in here. He created some kind of wound in me emotionally. And so what does he need to do now that he already committed that wound to address that wound and make it go away? Like he caused it, he can make it go away. That's what I'm thinking. Of course, that's to be questioned. Not necessarily true, but that's my believing mind in the moment. And so I'm believing he caused my pain. Now I'm asking myself, what do I need him to do so that I can be happy again, so that I can just be like, no problem forgiving him. There's just nothing left here for me to worry about. And wound is healed. All is good. It's all done and dusted. I don't have to uh, feel badly again. So, for example, he what was the example? He didn't listen to me basically. So what was my offense? What was the wound for me? He disrespected me was kind of what it felt like. So what would I need him to do to right that? First of all, I would need him probably to acknowledge that. He's like, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I noticed that I was treating you with kind of contempt or something. Maybe that was it. I don't know if that's exactly right here, but he would have to notice that he did something off, and then he would probably need to want to want to value our relationship enough to go further with that. And then probably I would need him to actually apologize and say something or do something that would really fix it for me, really make me feel like, you know what, I just love you anyway, forget about it, it's fine, really, no problem. So that for me is the difference between a need on the judge your neighbor worksheet and a want on a judge your neighbor worksheet. The want is just first reaction. I want him to smarten up, like I said. I just want him to do it right, and why can't he? Whereas the need is he didn't do what I wanted him to do. What do I need for him from him to be able to be at peace with that? I need him to really acknowledge what happened and to see the effect of that and to make some amends that would really um, right the wrong for me, and then I can walk away completely. Again, this is still argument with reality. That's why we're still questioning the thoughts that we put on a judge your neighbor worksheet. But it's getting really subtle. It's getting very deep. It's getting very close to the core of what's making me hold on to this. And when I can identify that and then question that, the the freedom that can come out of that is the same kind of freedom as if he had done, if he had actually acknowledged what he did and asked for forgiveness and all of that. So it's like a way of unlocking that for yourself without the other person having to actually change in any way. So that's my experience with the wants and the needs.
Very, very, very helpful. Thank you.
Well, there's a lot in that judge your neighbor worksheet. You can write the wants, the shoulds, and the needs exactly the same. I want him to change, he should change, and I need him to change. And it's just ding, 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 looks like the same thing. But if you sit in that and if you meditate on that and you pay attention to some of those differences I was playing with there, you can sometimes tease out a whole host of different stressful thoughts related to that. And sometimes when you do the work on some of these, they can be very insightful in allowing you to let go of the stress of that situation.
Yeah, one thing that's coming through from your response is yeah, the degree of subtlety, and also how that opens up the possibility of of our inner complexity and of dealing with the different parts of ourselves. So, I'm hearing about the wants, and I'm thinking about like kind of like the 2-year-old you said, or kind of like the id, which is just, and that's just the raw, like, I don't like this. Versus then when you start talking about should, I guess my mind supplied the term, the superego or the inner critic, and that's a different flavor, a different flavor of arguing with reality, as you put it. So I appreciate the the subtlety that there is within the different aspects of the judge in your worksheet better after this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm just building on what you were saying. When you get to the needs, it's almost like really hitting the ego, because that's the part that got really offended and felt that wound. And that's the part that needs that some kind of action from the other person to heal, at least in the story version of it. And then when you identify all these and then you question these, you can give all of these things to yourself. And that's very empowering.
That seems like really the key. I think that clicked in a way it hasn't before just now. That specifically when you were talking about repair, because I mean, it's sort of a vague sense of how it works in other ways, but around the needs, there's this idea of it almost seems like constructive or forward moving, like, hey, how can I move past this, or how can I move through this? And then the challenge can becomes when we give that over, or may come when we give that over outside ourselves to things we can't control or depend on. So the promise is of supplying it for ourselves along with everything else, and and that's how big would that be?
Yeah, that's it.
Obviously a practice.
That's the power of the work of Byron Katie, that you can take you're not dependent on other people to change in order for you to heal, and that's so freeing, so empowering. So yeah.